This might be one of the most emotionally impactful endings to any movie, ever. And is that really surprising? The Lord of the Rings trilogy is a faithful adaptation of Tolkien's books, and that man knew how to tell a good story. He understood how gut-wrenching it would be to leave his readers with the death of a complicated, likable man like Boromir at the end of his first book, right? Well, not quite. Things are actually a little more complicated than that, and we have more to thank Peter Jackson for than you might think.
My captain. My king.
Anyone who's been brave enough to read the Silmarillion knows that Tolkien can be a little long-winded, and that predilection extended into his more well-known works. When he first wrote The Lord of the Rings, he actually wrote it as one extremely long volume without sectioning it off into individual books. But as a way to cut costs, his publisher proposed The Lord of the Rings be made into a trilogy. Tolkien was originally opposed to the idea of splitting up his epic, not quite sequel to The Hobbit, as it broke up its intended narrative, but he ultimately agreed, and so The Lord of the Rings became 3 books: The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. And Boromir's death? You won't find it in Fellowship. That book ends with a chapter called The Breaking of the Fellowship, where Boromir tries to take the ring from Frodo, and he and Sam flee from their companions to go to Mordor alone. We don't learn of Boromir's fate until the opening pages of Two Towers, when Aragorn hears the call of the Gondian war horn and follows it to where Boromir lay wounded against a tree. In classic Tolkien fashion, the violence is skipped over and we're instead meant to sit in the consequences of it. We don't get any details about the battle Boromir undertook, but he's stuck with countless arrows and surrounded by 20 dead orcs. Aragorn asks about Frodo, and Boromir tells him he tried to take the ring and that Frodo escaped. Soon after, he and the other hobbits were overwhelmed with orcs, and he did his best to protect them, but they were captured. Aragorn kisses his brow, assures him Minas Tirith will not fall, and Boromir dies. What's left of the Fellowship sends his body downriver in a Viking funeral and continues on their way. So whether we're going with Tolkien's original one long text or the published 3 novels, there was no world in which Boromir's death should have punctuated Peter Jackson's 2001 adaptation of The Fellowship of the Ring. And yet, here it is, traumatizing viewers for more than 2 decades now, and traumatizing really is the word for it. The movie took this scene's emotionality and elevated it to a level the book never concerned itself with. So how and why was it so impactful? Well, the short answer is that Peter Jackson and his creative partners Philippa Boyens and Fran Walsh are absolute masters of the art of adaptation. When bringing a book, or in this case a series of books, to the screen, you have to fine-tune the source material into a properly cinematic experience. You have to have a deep understanding of the original work and make changes only where absolutely necessary. And Jackson and his cohorts applied an artistically delicate hand to Tolkien's writing for the most part. But nowhere is their dedication to the books more apparent than in how they treated Boromir. When bringing him to the screen, Boromir needed to be imbued with drama. Normally, when it comes time to give a book the movie treatment, you lose a lot of complexity. But in the case of Boromir, Jackson, Walsh, and Boyens actually deepened the character significantly. Book Boromir is a fairly middle-of-the-road character. Sure, he's prideful and focused on the well-being of his people, but he's still friendly and helpful to the rest of the Fellowship. He's not really much of a source of conflict until he tries to take the ring. Compare that to the movie Boromir, who walks into the Council of Elrond ready to stir up trouble and remains a wild card for the rest of the runtime. Sean Bean plays the character with noticeable instability. Every word he speaks makes it clear that this is a man living on a knife's edge. He's sentimental, desperate, and driven by his duty and his sense of justice.
Long has my father, the steward of Gondor, kept the forces of Mordor at bay. By the blood of our people are your lands kept safe.
He also harbors some disdain for Aragorn, the true king of Gondor, and while he's affectionate and empathetic toward the hobbits, he's also tempted by the ring on more than one occasion. The scene between him and Frodo in the forest feels like a natural escalation of something that's been boiling under the surface for the whole movie. And when Sean Bean lets out his memorable cry of, "Curse you! And all our plates!" before breaking down in tears, emotions are running high. After all that buildup, it actually makes more narrative sense to keep increasing the tension, which is part of why it made the most sense to include Boromir's death at the end of Fellowship. When it comes time for Boromir to fall, the viewers are as conflicted as he is, and thanks to Peter Jackson's aptitude for grandiose action scenes, he's given the send-off he deserves, and the film's finale feels all the more explosive. Unlike the book, we don't flinch away from Boromir's battle. We watch as he defends Merry and Pippin from an onslaught of orcs, bravely facing off against multiple foes at once. But when Lurtz, an orc captain invented for the movie, pierces Boromir's heart with an arrow, he's finally outmatched. He goes down fighting in agonizing slow motion, felling several more orcs through sheer force of will and determination as he's pelted with arrows. Exhausting the last of his strength, Boromir falls to his knees and meets Lurtz's eyes as he aims a killing blow. And then, Aragorn to the rescue. A new battle begins between the King of Gondor and the physical manifestation of evil itself. Lurtz falls and the mood is triumphant, but only for a moment. Boromir is still gravely injured, and when Aragorn goes to meet him, Sean Bean and Viggo Mortensen give us one of the most melancholy and beautiful joint performances ever put to screen. We get much of the same dialogue in the movie as we do in the book, but there are also a few additions. Since the relationship between Boromir and Aragorn is more fraught in the movie, and Aragorn himself is struggling with his kingly responsibilities, their deathbed resolution feels all the more meaningful.
I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall, nor our people fail. Our people.
When Boromir lets out a shuddering last breath and Aragorn tenderly kisses his brow, there is not a dry eye in the house. And by the time the credits roll, audiences are left feeling incredibly bittersweet about the ending of Fellowship. With Merry and Pippin kidnapped by orcs, Frodo and Sam on their way to Mordor alone, and Boromir redeemed but dead, this is a true breaking of the Fellowship. But this succession of tragedies also gives Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas a revitalized purpose to go into the second movie with. They have a new mission: rescue Merry and Pippin and reforge their fellowship. Now, imagine if Two Towers had instead opened with Boromir's death. Without the rising tension between him and Frodo throughout Fellowship, and especially during their last scene together in the forest, his battle would not have felt nearly as high stakes, and his death would have been at risk of falling flat. Plus, the structure is all wrong. Beginning the second movie of the trilogy with something so slow and somber would have made the energy lag, and Jackson would have had to work significantly harder to build momentum for everything that was to come.
Your friends are with you, Aragorn.
Let's hope they last the night.
Does that mean the movie's version of Boromir and his death are better? No. The character serves two different purposes depending on the medium. While both versions of Boromir are meant to represent the good and bad aspects of human nature, that's about where Book Boromir's purpose ends. His death does not pack the same intensely emotional punch as it does in the movie because it's not trying to excite theater-going audiences for the next installment in a trilogy. It is instead just one in a long line of tragedies. It's more meditative and poetic. Jackson, Boyens, and Walsh managed to toe the line and bring us both drama and poetry. They understood the nuances of adapting Tolkien's work to the screen in a way that no other creative team could have, and Sean Bean brought the whole thing home with an incredible performance that we're still in awe of all these years later. So even though it isn't technically faithful to the source material, this is one change we're glad they made to The Lord of the Rings. But that's just our opinion. Now we want to hear yours. Do you prefer Boromir's death in the book or the movie? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Nerdstalgic so you don't miss what we put out next.